Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the preliminary round of 2016 World Schools Debating Championship. Please turn off all your mobile phones. Thank you. For this round, this House believes that major film and television award shows should abolish award categories that are celebrated by gender. Debating this round are Team Germany, who are proposing, as well as Team India, who are opposing. Speaker for the proposition are first speaker Yoke, second speaker Judith, and third speaker Marcus. Please welcome them. Speaker for the opposition are first speaker Karthik, second speaker Hemant, and third speaker Dhananjay. Judging this debate are Rocio Abril from Argentina, Miriam Harman from Israel, and Han Do from the US. Speaking time for the speeches is 8 minutes. The first and last minutes are protected from points of information. A ring will be sounded after the first and after the 7th minute. There are no points of information during the reply speech. It is now my pleasure to welcome Yoke, the first speaker of the proposition, to open the debate.
With great power comes great responsibility. And that is fundamentally why we Team Proposition are so extremely proud to propose this motion today. Now we see two main issues that are affected by the motion that we're discussing today. First of all, the sexism that we have in our society, something that suppresses both men and women because there's a pressure to fill in certain roles. The second main problem we see is this binary narrative of gender, so that there are men and women. This is a problem. People that not fit into these two main categories are discriminated against. We believe that this is something that fundamentally improves on our side of the house. We are so proud to propose. Now we will be showing you this with the following schema. As the first speaker, I will be talking about some framing issues. So why the film industry is so important when we're covering these issues, and then I will look at the societal effects that our motion will improve. Our second speaker will be talking about the business, the film business itself, and how this will actually also improve you under our motion. Now let's look at the framing issues. So why are we talking about the film industry in general today? We actually see three main reasons why film is so important, why it has such an important effect on our society. First of all, the vast audience it has. First of all, quantity-wise, but also the fact that it bridges race, gender, class, age, and that's prevalent in so many countries. People in Germany watch Bollywood, and people in China look at Hollywood movies. So this is quite obvious and something that has a big effect on people. The second reason is the role model function that actors have. Because actors are not only important in the movies themselves, but also outside, because they are representatives and stand for certain groups and causes. The third reason that we see why it's important is because it mirrors and actually gives and changes society. First of all, it gives impulses. For example, we saw this with the movie 12 Years a Slave, which opened up the whole discussion on racism and slavery that are still prevalent in the US today. And secondly, because it reflects society. We've seen this because the film industry has changed over time. The portrayal of women has changed radically over the last 50 years, so we believe that this is another important fact. Now, why are award shows so crucial when we're talking about the film industry? Now, they are actually what praise the film industry. They're what determine what happens in the film industry. They're kind of like the highlights of the whole entire film year. They give publicity, they determine commercial success, and so important. So we need to understand, and this is so fundamental in this motion, that if we change these award shows, the film industry in turn will change as well, because their ultimate goal is actually to receive these prizes, because it is actually what keeps these movies going. Now, because the film industry and the award shows have such a big effect on society, we believe that it's important that we start here. We need to do better. We have all these problems, and we need to change something about it. Now, how will our side of the house achieve this? Now, as a first speaker, I will be talking about the societal benefits that this has. And our second speaker will be looking further at how it changes the business itself. Now, the first thing I'd like to talk about is the criteria of these award shows, but first a point.
Do you support separate sports tournaments only?
No, because this is actually perfectly pointing into my first point. Now, we see in film, it is fundamentally different to sports because we are not judging the physical capabilities. What is important in film is your ability to express yourself, to actually show and portray certain emotions, to give a feeling to somebody. And this has nothing to do with physical capabilities, unlike, for example, sports. And this is why we believe that it's so fundamentally unjust to actually separate women and men in these criteria when we're judging about films. As an analogy, we don't separate them by races either, because everybody in film and movies actually has the same preconditions to do well, to be a good actress. And that's why we believe that this is a fundamentally unjust thing. Now, we believe that the fact that this is bad, that this is unjust is bad per se, but it also has tangible impact and harms on our world. Now, this narrative actually promotes the idea that women and men are fundamentally different, and that they need to be judged differently as an effect. Now, this is something that, in our opinion, is something that fuels sexism in general. This is the idea that is actually behind sexism, that there is a difference between men and women, and that they need to fulfill certain roles. Now, we believe that this is a problem because under these categories, two things happen. First of all, it reinforces sexism. It gives this idea that there are fundamental differences. It also gives the idea that certain roles need to be fulfilled. Now, this is bad for both men and women because it creates a certain pressure to fill these roles, to conform to these stereotypes. Now, the second big problem we see is that it supports a binary narrative of gender. We believe that in the 21st century, we need to acknowledge that gender is a spectrum, that is not simply man or woman, but that there are also things in between. Now, a big good example for this is, for example, that are not biologically born with a specific gender. Now, as a fact, these actually represent 2% of our population, and now if we do not present and represent them in these categories, we say that this is a big problem because we're simply dropping 2% of our population and not representing or acknowledging them in any possible way. Now, we believe that this is unacceptable in society, and that our society will actually improve this in the following ways, due to the high impact that film has. Now, first of all, we see that it improves the situation because there is a confrontation with the problem. If we tell people there are no different categories for women and men, they will think, oh, there must be a reason for this. But people will start thinking. Not everybody will agree at the beginning, but at least it will start a discourse, a discussion, more acceptance. People will actually start talking about these issues and seeing that there are problems. Now, the second big thing that changes is that normalizes the situation. We're no longer saying there's men and women. We're saying that there's a spectrum, that people need to be judged on their capabilities, not the sex that they were born with or the sex that they are. Now, we believe that this is good on two fundamental levels. By First of all, it is good for the individuals. They're able to be more fulfilled. They are able to actually live out their true personalities. They're not conformed by sexism and the roles that society imposes on them. This is good for our entire society because we have happier, more productive individuals that are able to contribute to our society in a more valuable way. Therefore, no thank you. But we also believe that it's good for society in general. And at this point, we need to consider the wide-reaching influence that film actually has on society all over the world. We're not only talking about countries where there is already relative equality, we're also talking about countries that still don't have the most fundamental rights for women. So if we actually change this whole precedent, if we actually change the fact that men and women are so fundamentally different, and because, of course, the film industry will also change in order to adapt this, we actually promote more progressive and more accepted society. And this not only is good, but it's also good for society as a whole because it's into progress. The full potential of everybody in society can be used, and the society as a whole will progress and move towards a more accepted, a more progressful society. Now, what have we showed you on our side of the house today? We've shown you that the film industry is so fundamentally important in everybody's lives. We've shown you that if we change the award shows, we're also changing the films themselves, because the films actually strive to achieve these awards. And then I've shown you how it fundamentally has good impact through the issues today, and how it changes the narrative that there are only two genders. and how this is good not only for individuals, but also for the entire society. And because of all these reasons, and because of the fact that we have men who role on our side, we are so extremely proud to propose this law.
Speaking time was 7 minutes and 53 seconds.
Thank you for your speech.
Oh, Hemant said it. Hemant said. Hemant said we shouldn't have it up. Someone is saying we should calculate the size. Hemant said so he's having net
Sorry, everyone. Can you please be silent for a minute? Thank you.
I'd now like to call Kapate to give his speech.
In a world in which Olivia Wilde was not cast in The Wolf of Wall Street because she was too old to star alongside Leonardo DiCaprio, despite being 9 years younger to him. In a world in which Catherine Bigelow was the first and only woman in the 75 years of Oscar history. In this kind of world in which patriarchy and discrimination are so entrenched into the entertainment industry, in this world we must have some mechanism to protect women in the show business who will never get recognition in a world with gender neutral awards. The entire problem with the proposition case is that they premise it on a fundamentally false assumption. The assumption being that if we have gender neutral awards, men and women will get them with equal frequency. We heard no justification for this premise on which the entire case centers. If we can show that the women are much less likely to receive awards on their side when there are gender neutral awards, when the majority of Oscar voters are white and male and old, in this kind of world, it's unlikely that women are ever going to get the kind of awards that they think are going to benefit society. So what we think that we must recognize heroines and heroes. What is our policy? We are happy to have gender segregated awards. Moreover, we're happy to support the extension of this to other roles, like directors and screenwriters. We think that if there were a best female director, Catherine Bigelow wouldn't have taken that long to get this kind of recognition. What do we have to prove to win this debate? We have to prove to you that their policy disempowers women in show business and reduces the relative perception of women in society. They have to defend allowing a free rein on a sexist film industry that wants to crush women into traditional stereotypical roles. No, we don't have to defend any real benefits on our side. We recognize that the rate of progress has been slow, but it has been real. It has been actual change in the way that women have to see it in show business. We think a policy that reverses this is something that we want to fight against. Some points of rebuttal before I move to my constructive. On the idea of the gender binary being attacked. They spent around 3 minutes on this, but let's tell you that's not part of the debate. It's regrettable that these people would not get this kind of recognition. So we are decades away from any time and intersex people are actually likely to get good roles and actually likely to get awards. In a world where Eddie Redmayne, a white cis male, has to play a trans woman in a movie, it's incredibly unlikely that even with their policy, they're going to have trans and intersex people getting these awards in the first place. That can't be part of the debate unless they can establish it's true, which it's not. First argument as to why, I'll be telling you about why we have an obligation to correct entrenched inequality in show business, and secondly, why the abolishment of gender segregated awards harm society. First argument as to the obligation of inequality in show business. The context of this debate has to be clear. Show business is dominated by males. Directors, producers are all overwhelmingly male. This is in developing countries, which they were happy to debate. These are overwhelmingly like the fact that viewers want to see movies with customary roles, where the woman is a sidekick and a sex object, while the male is the hero. This kind of world creates a demand for films in the film industry that's male-dominated and unrepresentative of actual society and the values that we hold. In this kind of context, there isn't a level playing field for female actresses and male actors. There is simply no equal opportunity to get the kind of recognition that awards mean. I'll take you in a minute. That's why we need this kind of gender segregation award, because they enable roles to be known and nuanced so that women can get recognition for their roles, they can get recognition for their actressing prowess. What do you have to say to this?
Do you also believe that there should be separate categories for people of a different race? And yes, why?
We don't think it's the case because first, the idea of race is different in the sense that it's not about traditional race roles as it is so much about gender roles that we see in film and industry. Like the idea of gender roles is much more portrayed in film industry than race roles. Secondly, the problem of race is much more intense in the hiring and the production of film industry, like in the directors and screenwriters, and that's the kind of thing where it's much more progressive, and that's what we can't really address with this policy, so it's not part of this debate. So in this kind of world, there's an obligation to get an award. Why? Because this is the benefits they can contribute. So they can get awards for having really good female actresses with really good female roles that are nuanced and actually explore the depth of what society can understand and really care about when they look at a film. That kind of world creates a demand for films that have much more nuanced female characters. Like, for example, Claire Underwood in House of Cards, sparking a discussion on the role of women in politics and the kind of barriers that they face. In this kind of world, there's huge benefit to these actresses and to society as a whole, as I'll talk about in my next argument. But to these actresses themselves, it actually promotes more than actually getting better salaries, for example. If they get that kind of recognition, we think that's a reason to have gender segregated roles in themselves. So what this principle means is that the level playing field does not exist, and we must help at least correct the fact that it doesn't exist. We must try to level that playing field for the women who face intense sexism in the film industry, because these actresses need gender segregated awards in order to get recognition. So we cannot abolish them. What did we hear from them on the principle? Nothing. The only thing they had to say was that it adds net utility to society. That's not enough. They have to try to show us how their policy has based on a principle and actually makes any kind of sense. They can't simply get away by saying that it increases utility in society. But let's take them on those grounds as well, with my second argument as to why gender segregated awards empower women in society. This matters because pop culture, as they said, has a huge impact on society. People's perception of society is shaped by movies and films that they see. But what we differ from them is that we show that when movies portray women as sex objects and sidekicks in a world where they can't actually get, or much less likely to get an award, in that kind of world, that's much more harmful, and it encourages stereotypes of ideal women in kind of life. That's the kind of comparative that we don't want to have. This is the comparative between the two sides in this debate. On our side, girls see a lot more female role models in the female show business industry because of the fact that these are much more prominent, that they get awards. Like, for example, the fact that you have Beyonce and Emma Watson having prominence as female actresses, and more importantly, the kind of causes that the actresses champion can often be very beneficial to society in itself. Like the fact that both of these women are feminist activists and increase the accessibility of feminism to general society. I think it's hugely beneficial. Next, on the fact there's comparatively much less objectification. Movies that objectify women are much less likely to receive awards for best female actresses. That means in our world, we have a lot more probability that there's going to be movies that actually focus on women as a much more nuanced role, that actually encourages to break stereotypes of identification on our side. What happens in their world? In their world, there are far fewer female role models for young girls who are growing up to look at, because of the fact that they don't get that kind of prominence that you get when you have awards for women, when you have a guarantee that at least one woman every year will win an award, will win recognition for her prowess in acting, which they can't guarantee on their side. There's also likely to be much more sex objectification, because when directors think that the best way to get a movie, to get a best actor role is to have a lot more discussion of males who are much more likely to get these kinds of awards. They're much more likely to objectify women and lead to the kind of harmful stereotypes that they wanted to break. These are much more stereotypical roles being given to men, which entrenches sexism and tells young girls that maybe only men can be scientists and soldiers, and prevents the kind of discussion on the role of women in STEM and in the military. Because ultimately, we're the side that wants to recognize the role of females in the show business industry, because we recognize that it isn't a level playing field, and because we recognize that we both need heroes and heroines. We're extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you, Swati, for your speech.
Speaking time was 8 minutes and 14 seconds.
It's now my pleasure to ask Judith to give her speech.
We find it great that Team India comes here talking about women empowerment. And we absolutely agree with them. We on our side, Team JMB, Team Proposition also wants women empowerment. But what we also want is empowerment for all those that Team Opposition is neglecting under status quo. Because they're not talking about male empowerment, whereas we talked in our first speech that men, just as women, are also suffering under stereotypes, and also intersex people, transgenders, and all these that they say are not important or not part of this debate. We on our side, Team Proposition, are very proud that they also fall under our side. What I'll do to you in the second speech of Proposition is I'll first repeat all the arguments for that by first opposition. Now I'll do some reconstruction to show you that actually everything that Yogi said is still standing on our side of the house before we move on talking about the improved impact on the business. Let's first talk about the argument about patriarchy, empowering women, and how everything's going to get worse on the other side of the house. We have several levels of response to that. Firstly, we believe that it's fundamental and very important to tackle the problem at its root. At the moment, we have separated categories, school gender, and all these issues, all the problems they're talking about are existent. We think that everything they say about sexism and the role of women, how they objectify under status quo, just show that we need reform and that we need to change something that's going terribly wrong under status quo. Secondly, we also do not believe that solely only men would get what is called best actor, because we have checks and balances, we have protests, and when we're looking at the past years, for example, we saw the protest group, Oscars are too wide, where a black minority group complained about the Oscars being too wide, and the majorities of Oscar went to white actors and actresses, and not black actors and black actors. And that went viral in the media and showed that actually people have a huge impact, and also the justification that the Oscar committee always has to give, we believe that this also shows that they would not be too one-sided. But let's talk about the point of information. When we ask if they also promote separated awards for people of different races, and they say no, because race roles do not exist that much. And secondly, in their production, all other ways of film business, there's less discrimination. We find it disgusting to look at reality. No, because firstly, absolutely, there are race roles and race stereotypes in every single movie that we see. We see this stereotype of Afro, the lazy gospel to Latino, not the Asian. So we fundamentally don't see how that stands there outside of the house. And secondly, if we look at the racial distribution of actors and actresses, and those who actually get awarded, we see that there is discrimination, and that some people who are mostly of white and Caucasian race get more awards than other people. And then talking about how women are objectified does not really help them either, because if we have, and then talking about women not being part of the film business at all does not really stand either. Because firstly, we now say we'll still have women, obviously, because they will still be part of the place, but because there will be more competition for the award of the best actor or best actress, we believe that the roles will be less objectifying because there's more competition. No, thank you. The rest clashes with my own stance. But let's come to summary. About the society impact about the unjust separation. No, thank you. For men and women, that is proposed by some opposition. They did not say anything much. They ignored it and did not tackle it directly. And then secondly, about the binary narrative of that we have under status quo. Now, intersex people are fundamentally discriminated against. All they said is this is not part of the debate. This is not part of the world. Society is not ready for that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we actually found this and believe it should be part of the debate and it should be part of the world. And we also believe that society is ready for it. And when we look at the movement and developments in the past year, we see that society is getting more and more ready for that. When we look at the past blockbusters, the Danish girl, where the first transgender operation ever was described, we see how this is getting more and more into the spotlight, and we believe that this shows that society is very ready for that. And apart from that, they confuse transgender people with intersex people, which is fundamentally different, as our first speaker do that. Let's now continue to talk about my own constructive speech, which I will talk about the impact on film businesses. In film business, all those who are involved want to get awards. Why that's the case? I'll take you.
How likely are women to get lead roles in a world where directors know that men are much more likely to get roles because of gender?
Point, because you're acknowledging that there are gender roles, but you're not willing to do anything against it. You have to tackle the problem, and it's very rude. And when we still have gender roles, we will have more competition if we have the same rule for men and women. And women are less likely to be objectified because objectification is exactly what? Because under status quo, they are objectified because they want to get Oscars and they want to get other prizes for films. But if we do not have the separation between men and women, what their performances judged and based on is no longer whether male or female, whether they portray themselves in a stereotypically male or female manner, but merely and solely on the way that they act. And this is actually what film and drama is all about, whether they manage to show emotion and stuff like that. But let's come back to the questions. Why does everybody who's involved in film business want to get awards? Firstly, money. Often they get some money as a prize, and you're sure to thank you. The next movies will be extremely funded. Secondly, prestige. You'll get a big name in the business, obviously show business, know who you are, and they're most likely to want you in the next role. And thirdly, public attention. The media reports about you, the pop culture reaches most people. For example, after having won Oscar for 12 Years a Slave, Lupita Nyong'o was finally in everybody's mind where she was not before. And all three reasons make people want Oscars. Since the way of getting them is to adapt to the requirements set by the awards, the film business as a whole is tailored to be as successful as possible in getting awards. Looking at roles, actors and actresses won Oscars for it, we see a clear tendency that there are very stereotypical roles. For example, Sandra Bullock won an Oscar for The Blind Side, where she plays a sexy, beautiful, rich mother who's doing charity when she's not doing shopping. Or, for example, Leonardo DiCaprio, who had many movies, for example, The Great Gatsby, which he showed a soft and vulnerable side, but the movie he, in the end, got the Oscar for was Red, which he took around in the forest fighting a bear. Let me now show you which two stakeholders. Firstly, individual actors, because they want the role that wins. And it's more likely to accept sexist roles. If they accept sexist roles, it's more likely that they will win at the end. And also directors and screenwriters, etc. Because they create movies that aim to fulfill stereotypes sexist because they also want to be successful. So in the first place, we have more sexist plays. And secondly, even if you have also others, it's more likely that famous actors and actresses, those who actually influence the public, take those that are stereotypically written because they know that this will be the ones they'll succeed with. Why is that bad? Because we have no diversity of movies and stereotypes that are normalized. How will we do this? When we do not have separation along the gender lines, we will have a more fair choice. Because you do not judge the performance on typical male and female stereotypes, but on a common ground, which is the actual essence of films, the transmission of emotions, feelings, etc. And short, just the way they are performing. And that is, the impact is great because we will have more diversity available for mainstream audience. When women no longer feel pressure to be particularly female or sexy to win an award, and they will also dare to take more extreme roles for both genders and blockbusters. And that has great impact on business and society, as our first speaker told us, there will be no discord and it will be normalized. So in summary, now what I've told you in my speech. What I told in my constructive speech is that apart from all the societal impacts that Yogi talked about in our previous speech, that actually still stand in proposition, they also have great impact on the business industry. On one hand, as actors, on the other hand, on directors, screenwriters, and everybody, which again leads to all the impacts that Yogi has talked about. Because they also stand, we're very proud to do both. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith, for your
Speaking time was 8 minutes and 3 seconds.
Wait till DJ at the
welcome him, the second speaker of the team of.
Right in the first we published the incentive structures of individuals in the media industry. We told you that, like they told you in their second speech, individuals in the media industry want things like awards because it gives them reputation, recognition, popularity, and money. Which they then again said in their second speech. Then we told you the only incentive that exists in an industry so much with sexism to invest in the casting managers. And the failure to engage with this, the failure to engage with the idea that women are sidelined and that women are alienated from the film industry and at best put in sexually objectified roles or in romantic dramas, clearly shows how much of a non-case the two speeches have. So what are the major things they told us? Their only attacks were in the expense of the principle. First thing I had to tell you was that gender is diverse and what about other genders? When Karthik's already told you why this is an unrealistic idea and how we are rather tackling the real issues. But secondly, we tell you, even in their paradigm, when there's a single category for all genders, it's structurally worse off for these trans women. For example, when there's systemic transphobia, like they concede to you in the provision of these awards. When all Oscar voters are predominantly white, male, and old, this is the kind of people who get even more affected on their side of the house. So at best, it's a point for us anyways. But finally, even if you were to completely discount any rebuttal you provided for this, let's just look at the net utility. But we told you that there are much more women, not just those showbiz industry, but listen to the media, like they again reiterated on-site of proposition quite funnily, and that therefore the net utility of this policy, even if there were some regretful harms, is still better and that's going on. The second realistic attack and about the extent of the principle they had were what about risks? First of all, they asserted that roles exist, but even assuming that this is not a different debate and a part of this debate, why is theirs uniquely different? Because when actors like Denzel Washington and Will Smith go on screen, they are still kids. This is uniquely different in the case of women where they are portrayed as sex objects or when they are portrayed in particularly harmful gender stereotypes, like again that PM told. What is the impact of these two reports? It means that when this debate is about existing segregations and whether about the outcomes and the legitimacy, and the only responses they had to our case was on the extent of the principle. By essentially taking them down, we have won this debate already. But let's look at the comparative that we established in our first speech. We told you that reform has been happening and then you structurally reverse it on their careers. How did we tell you this? You know, there are a lot of things. And structural problems exist in the way awards and roles are provided. The casting managers and producers are not predominantly male. The demand is predominantly male. The Oscar voters are white roles and male. And then therefore women get less incentive to give women roles. And then ultimately, the perception of women as shaped by showbiz is affected because one, there are lesser women, and secondly, because if there are any women, they exist in stereotype and objectified. Amazingly, to all of this nuanced analysis, all that they had to say was to assert a magical change happens. They fail to understand that awards existing for women does not translate into those women getting. Because we've consistently shown you that women are significantly and structurally worse off on their civil women this way. But finally, the other argument we presented to you in our first speech was that women in the acting roles are disproportionately affected when they get lesser roles, which again, they supplemented when they told you how roles and awards give you money, attention, and reputation. The final death blow that they gave in their own case was with the example of Sandra Bullock, when they told you that you need to be a sexy woman to win awards even in segregated categories. That is to say, that when you're bringing a singular category where there is no incentive to provide specific awards to women or create roles that are more eligible for these awards specified to women, these impacts become much more amplified.
So do you think that all of a sudden movies just won't? So don't you think that there will be actually more competition to actually create better women roles?
We don't understand. So you're saying that in the status quo, there are no women roles, that there is structural problems in the way that women are portrayed in film media, and at the same time, saying that movies require women, no, just because we're creating gender neutral awards, there will be roles. There is no link between this, but there is a link with the contrary, which you've already established in first speech. Please provide us analysis, at least in your last speech. So moving on, and I'll be showing you two things. One, how this disproportionately affects non-white film industries, and secondly, how aspiring female actors lose their freedom of expression on their films. So, all the conversation that's been happening in this debate so far on side proposition has been about white industry. We reject this idea. The point is, Bollywood is the biggest film industry in the world, and things like Korean media are so popular. We're going to be talking here about the unique problems, intense sexism, as they put it in their prime minister's speech. What are the problems in this area, and how do they and exacerbate? There is definitely more informed media from male as a result of the conservative nature of these societies. But secondly, there is an expectation placed on movies to provide stereotypically male roles. Things like action sequences are seen as norms for movies to follow. Therefore, movies are only valued when they portray men in this particular manner, and often any form of female portrayal is rejected by these societies. That is to say that, therefore, under their scenarios, women are given structural men, but at the point at which they don't have access to these roles that are liked by these conservative societies, and are therefore judged differently also by the voters in these communities when they expect stereotypically male things from movies. We think clearly Germany doesn't understand how conservative societies work. Because in their paradigm, these industries only satisfy the needs of this conservative society. Women get lesser recognition, and actual good roles are reduced on their roles in these specific industries like seeing as that aspects lose their freedoms of expression. You can understand that women already have restricted access to say a role in the media, to have a career in the media. How does this happen? Specifically, it already happens, like I told you, in industries like Bollywood, which are conservative. But secondly, cultural norms suppress their ability to access these areas. Therefore, the only support systems become things like role models, women who win awards, women who are seen as popular groups. And at the point where they say not find any role models, but also see that any female roles are sidelined. When the narrative becomes that you have to be a sex object or act in one particular type of role, have to act in a romantic drama to be recognized or to get a role, to get an award in the best place, because that's the only men and other stereotypical voters want to see from these women. We think it's systematically deters women from joining this. Obviously, this is bad because this is a direct restriction on their freedom of expression. But secondly, we also tell you there's a trickle-down lesser women after the weekend becomes this. So all your childhood, and only the long complete by joining the university. And as a result of this, we're more than happy to.
I'd now like to call Marcus to give his speech.
One of the only things we can actually be happy about in today's debate is that India's mood always brightened up when we told them that media is important and that film and TV industry is important. The fundamental question we just have to ask, if we all acknowledge that media, like films and movies, have such an important role in society, is what are the consequences of this power that they have? What is the responsibility we thus have to look at in today's debate? I'll do this in the whip speech of the proposition side by looking at two different points. First of all, the impact we have on society, like in the sense of sexism, and then secondly, the impact that it has, in the sense of a gender spectrum. So, first of all, two very strategic, strategic mistakes that side opposition had in their first speech. Namely, to first of all base their entire constructive on the assumption that their rebuttal was actually going. And then secondly, note that they told us we didn't have a principal argument, while dismissing our principal argument with practical implications that he spent his whole rebuttal talking about. Okay, so the thing is, the most contested thing in this debate was that we were talking about gender neutral rewards and how that is going to affect women and whether or not they're going to still get those rewards. So opposition came in with the bold claim that suddenly women won't have any rewards at all. So first of all, we highly contest this idea. We say that there is a checks and balances system, there is pressure from the media, there is pressure from actresses. We also say that we saw this, for example, happening with the Oscars of the white movement, when we see that because black people were not represented on Oscars for 2 or 3 years, that pressure was there, that now discourse is rolling very fast. But what we also think what we also say is that we still need female roles. You cannot have movies without we say that because the movies are actually need to be realistic, because you have to buy a movie in order to watch it. They also need to be women. But we even say that we will have positive impacts because now that they are in one particular movement, we actually have good men because they actually have to compete with them, that the quality of the roles that women have to take on will actually increase. Okay. But let's say that we buy into opposition argumentation. Let's say that even if only men would get this sort of rewards. We say that even if this was the case, this is the best proof that feminism is actually necessary. It is the best proof that sexism is so prevalent in the film industry. We say that if only men get those rewards, we actually reveal sexism that they say is so entrenched in the movie industry. It reveals how women are disenfranchised under the system that we have at the moment. We say that if we only have at the moment we have this narrative that that opposition promotes here, that actresses only get the acting rewards because there's actually an extra category only for them. Otherwise, they won't be fit to get their things. Narrative that we'll take care of. So because their consequence that they want to promote here today is actually one that would reveal sexism, and is actually something that would give a movement like feminism a better reason to a more reason to exist, or at least more acceptance in society, because people actually see the problem, and because actresses will get rid of the narrative that they only get rewards because there is a category for them, we're very proud to continue proposing this mission. Also, we challenge that opposition to answer to us if they're so happy about how things are wonderfully working fine at the moment with like gender separation. How is it that we're still having to talk, like we still need to talk about topics like sexism? No, thank you. Why is there still so much sexism to complain about if things are working wonderfully fine at the moment? The last point we need to look at when we talk about like on the societal impacts. In the second speech, they raised the example of Bollywood. Of course, it's very favorable for India to talk about Bollywood. Obviously, that makes sense for them. That sadly, this is not the only thing we can talk about in this debate. But also, we say that if like the sexism is so prevalent in Bollywood, like this is like the most like there's the highest reason to actually go there and fight sexism. I mean, if only men are represented like in a positive way in those movies, and this is like the part where it is most necessary in in those cases. Okay. So going furthermore on talking about societal impact, we have first of all say that we acknowledge like the physical differences that exist between men and women. That we say that the acting skills necessary for being a good actor or actress are the same. The ability to express emotions, the ability to place yourself inside of a role and make that role look realistic, are all the same acting skills, not dependent on any physical ability. So that's, for example, why the sports POI was like, they let it drop because they actually realized that it didn't make any sense. But also what they didn't refute, but simply dismissed with practical implications, I'll touch you in a second, is principal argument that I'll go on after.
Are female role models who mobilize their awards and recognition for feminist issues good for feminism?
What can you repeat?
Are female role models who mobilize their awards and recognition for feminist issues good for the feminist movement?
Okay, we say okay, then it's good for the feminist movements that we have female actresses in this good position. So I'll say that it's not really the ones that always get the rewards, but mostly those who get the highest media attention, the ones who earn the most, that do not necessarily have to be the ones that win Oscars and Golden Globes. For example, actresses that do not get like those awards that are made for certain sort of movies, but are actually still like very popular. We also say that. Okay, so that's like basically the answer to the POI. That women are actually high paid, and those are the ones who have the most influence. For example, Emma Watson didn't get an Oscar yet, but still has the most influence through impression. Okay, so the principal point that side of the proposition raised here was that separating men and women means that we say that they can't be judged on the same criteria. That means that men and women have to fulfill different roles in the movie, meaning because there is so much impact on movies, they have to fulfill different roles in life. Something that promotes and re-encourages gender stereotypes that we exist and that we all agree were something that was really bad. Okay, talking about the last point about the gender spectrum. And opposition simply dismissed the whole second constructive point that proposition brought up by saying, okay, we're not ready yet for it. So first of all, we say we're talking about 2% of the population, so obviously this is something that affects many, many people. We also say that if they go with us so far as to say that the power of movies is actually that big, if actually big power means big responsibility, then the only way to actually spark discourse in that sense is to means reaching many, many people, and that is only possible through a medium that actually also reaches many, many people. So we say that movies and films are actually the ways that will be best for actually promoting or sparking discourse in that region, because they are the ones that have the most influence. If we accept, and both sides did so, that movies have large influence, then we have to ask how they use that influence. And we say that it would be the most beneficial if they are if they come near our role models and our promoters of progressive discourse. So that is so that intersex people will have more acceptance, will have more better place in society in the future. So because we win on the impact of society, and because we're helping intersex people go with proposition.
Speaking time was 8 minutes and 16 seconds.
Dhananjay, the first speaker of the event.
We have to attack the problem in its root. That was the basic line the side proposition kept pushing throughout this debate. Now, they wonderfully portrayed reasons for which problems exist, but they failed to show us really what this root problem really was. That's where we stepped in. We showed you the true root problem. The root problem was male directors, was male voters who end up pushing their own sexist viewpoints on these award committees in the first place. That was the root problem. And when we pushed that idea across, we got no response. They did not contest this, and they didn't tell us how in any scenario they were changing this. And as a result, by their own method of tackling the root problem, they've already failed this debate. So they truly failed once more to show you any solvency. So what I'm going to do is simple. Whatever outcomes they claim, I'm going to take them out and show you why none of them truly have. Before I move to the outcomes, let's look at a small bit of principle class we have as to whether or not it's legitimate to discriminate on the basis of gender in this case. Now, firstly, they told you that it's promoting a narrative that gender is binary. We tell you firstly that that is an argument for abolishing gender in the entirety of society. That is harmful inherently, especially in this circumstance, because recognizing gender biases and tackling them is extremely essential for changing these problems in society. You can't just abolish them and hope the problems go away. And secondly, let's ask ourselves, they told you that trans people and other genders were extremely important stakeholders. What they did not tell you was how they benefit on their side. Because on their side, they didn't show you how they're likely to win awards. We've told you reasons, once again, how due to the voters, how due to the public, how due to the sentiment of the movies that come out now, these people are unlikely to win any awards. How when they don't win any awards, that looks even worse on their side of the house. And they have not reported this. And as a result, even principally they might have a little leeway on the outcomes, they don't benefit the stakeholder who they've claimed to benefit the most throughout this debate. But this debate eventually became about outcomes, and it became mostly about the women, the most important stakeholder here, the majority stakeholder in this debate. So what is the effect on these actors? Firstly, let's clear up a bit of unimportant stuff they told us in this. They told us a lot on how the media is important and how TV shows and movies are important, and told you how award shows, specifically for these actors, as incentives, are also important. Yes, we agree with that. That's 5 minutes of their speeches gone. Where we contest is how they utilize these awards. No, thank you. And they've shown you is that awards are important. They're important for the actors, they're important for society. All we need to do as an opposition at this point of time is prove to you on their side there are less awards. They've set it up perfectly for us because they've told you that awards are extremely important. They've given you the reasons themselves when they tell you that awards are important for shaping the way society views the role models. They've given you the reason themselves when they told you it changes society's viewpoints. All we need to show now is that roles are likely to be pushed and that awards are likely to be taken away. And this is here this is where we take the debate away. Before that, yes.
Even if we go with the very worst case, and no woman would ever win an award, we at least have public discourse, no joking.
Thank you. I'll get to that point on public discourse and how your apparent public discourse doesn't really solve majority of the problems. But firstly, let's look at what you have told us about the status quo. You told us the status quo is currently promoting ideas that men and women are judged differently, that there are roles and that there are stereotypes. While we accept that this does exist, we tell you that one of the most effective ways to combat this is women and gender-specific awards. What does this do? This means that no matter what of other competition, one woman is going to win Female Oscar of the Year. This means there is where the competition exists. They told you how competition was important. We agree. Competition exists when you know you have a chance of winning. When a woman knows that she is never likely to win any award because the voters are inherently male and unlikely to ever give her an Oscar, she's less likely to try when she knows that she's going to win if she actually pulls off a right show. What does this mean for the roles on our side of the house? They're more likely to be diversified. People are more likely to take experiments with roles in women and more likely to represent them in different ways. They're more likely to do benefits, which they said they came on their side of the house, actually on our side. They conceded to this when in their first speech they came out here and told you the ways women have been portrayed in media has drastically been changing. That is true, that is beneficial, it's something that falls on our side. Now, honestly, OI and how you told us that it improves the system even if women aren't good enough over here. And the thing is that in this case scenario, it's not enough to just have discourse. They gave you the example of how people came up here and said, Oscar's so white, and then something changed. Oh wait, nothing changed. The truth is, just because there's discourse all around, that doesn't mean the Oscars has a massive incentive to change. It hasn't changed so far. It's unlikely to change so far. They've given you no reasons. They've given you no evidence. We're not going to buy that argument. It's too late to make anything up right now. The true problem, the root problem, we identified correctly was patriarchy. Now we tackle that problem at the root. They've ignored all of our points. Somehow we support even having gender segmentation for directors. How that increases visibility, how that increases specific roles, and therefore is beneficial. So, no, thank you. What have we shown you under how awards is important for these women when we get it? We've shown you when these women get awards, they get publicity. As a result, they are made feminist icons and their point of legitimacy. This awards was extremely important. And at the end of this point in itself, I've shown you awards are less likely. They concede awards are less likely. None of their other benefits can ever trump this. When they remove role models, they remove the idea and the want to diversify on roles, they entrench women in these roles, they entrench them in these stereotypes. I'll take point of information at the outcome.
Of course, do you approve of women winning awards simply because there's an extra reason?
What? Can you repeat?
Do you approve of women gaining awards simply because there's an extra category for them?
Yes. When women gain awards, it's extremely helpful in the status quo. We've given you reasons consistently on how it affects society in a very positive way. Yes, we'd like women to gain these awards. We don't stand for your side, which somehow supports women getting no awards whatsoever. We don't. No, thank you. Now, what lastly was the effect on society? Firstly, they came up here and told you that we're talking about conservative society. And then came up here and gave you from there we heard no response whatsoever. They dropped this argument. And why is it extremely important? Because Hollywood isn't even the biggest movie industry out there, Bollywood is. They've conceded that the biggest movie industry in the world isn't affected properly by their motion. We've already won this debate on that outcome with that point alone. The effect on viewers, the effect on little girls who no longer think they have a chance, no longer listen to feminist icons who are publicly out there is massive. We've shown you this award is essential. And the last, when they failed to rebut any of our structural reasons, they told you sexism still exists right now. That doesn't mean it hasn't been improved. That doesn't mean that this process is much more effective than their process of shoving women into competition where they have no real chance, no real scope for improvement. We need to recognize both heroes and heroines. Proud photos.
Thank you, Dhananjay, for your speech.
Speaking time was 8 minutes and 6 seconds.
It is
Let's clean this debate up. Both sides agree that sexism exists in showbiz. This can't drastically change in the near future, and we recognize that. We can only make incremental changes and hope that in the long term, things can happen for the better. Both sides agree that film directors are driven by the reward from getting a award by this incentive that factors into their casting and directing. The only debate to be had here, and the only one that only Team India engaged in, is on the specific impacts of gender segregated awards and gender neutral awards. We on Team India, we put to you that in the context in which this kind of debate takes place, in the context in which the film industry is male dominated, in which voters are male dominated, and which every kind of demand is for a movie which is male dominated, there is no level playing field. There needs to be some kind of recognition for the female actresses who scale a mountain in order to get the kind of better roles which are more nuanced, which don't objectify them. That's the kind of recognition they need that only Team India can give you. We put to you that there is a world that we put to you that is imperfect but improving. We finally have female best directors. So we have discussion on female roles and feminist actresses refusing the traditional roles that objectify them. And of course, as Team Proposition pointed out, sexism is still a problem. We don't think they changed that. We think that the policy, in fact, worsens it. Because the root problem, as you pointed out to you, isn't in the acting. It's in the directors, best female screenwriters. That's the kind of thing that only we target on our side, that they can't decide. That's how we try to improve an imperfect and improving situation. They can't do that at all. We also clarify one last time that intersex people are not part of this debate. There is simply no scope for it. There isn't even a single prominent chance. The speaker pointed out, this discourse doesn't actually change anything. Just like the fact that the Oscars so white didn't change anything. The fact that you can have a race-neutral Oscar in which white people still get the majority of awards, the fact means that when you have a gender-neutral Oscar, you'll still have men getting the majority of awards because of the systemic advantages that they have in status quo, regardless. We also told you about the importance of having female role models, and when there's at least one female actress who's going to get an award every year, that means there are more female role models for young girls who are growing up to have. The only response they had to this was in a POI when they offensively stated, isn't it worse for them to get an award if they didn't deserve it? We rejected the idea that they don't deserve it in the first place. We think that was offensive. We told you they had nuanced roles. We have much more exploration of the kind of roles that people can have, that women can have in society and in film. That doesn't happen on their side because, as we pointed out, there's no incentive when the competition that they wanted to talk about doesn't happen because there's no guarantee of that kind of award. When directors, even if they are sexist themselves, know that the voters are sexist, know that a man is much more likely to get an award than a woman. That's where the incentive really comes into play. That's why on their side, they're much more likely to have male-dominated films, male-dominated awards. That's why we won this debate.
Thank you, Karthik, for your speech.
Speaking time was 4 minutes and 5 seconds.
It is now my pleasure to ask Yoga to finish this debate and give the proposition to the
This is what we saw in this debate. As the reply speaker of team proposition, I will be doing three things for you. First of all, I'll be taking a closer look at the approach that both teams took. Then I will be looking at the two clashes that we saw in this debate, business and society. And then I will hopefully help you decide which team actually had the correct answer to this big problem that we saw today. But first, a closer look at the approach. Now, both teams fundamentally there's a problem with sexism in the industry, and that this is due to structural and systematic issues. Now, team problem, we need to do better. We actually need to fix this system. We have to actually tackle the problem at its roots and change the problem. We found it very strange that team opposition in this debate, while they did recognize the problem, didn't and actually see that status quo isn't working, actually saw no necessity whatsoever to actually change the problems that they saw in this debate. Now let me come to the two main clashes, starting with business. Now we have the problem in this debate that team opposition built their entire case on one very false assumption and one very false logic. Their whole case was built on the fact that they feared that under our side, women will no longer be represented in films and awards at all. Now we showed with many layers of analysis that this is not true. First of all, because we simply still need women roles, and secondly, because they are checks and balances from the media, which is the point that they mostly dismiss. However, the crucial point, if we're talking about this, that even if this doesn't happen, even if there are no women whatsoever more in award shows, we do not progress the feminist cause in any way if we actually support the narrative that women only get these awards because there's an extra category for them. We're actually promoting the view that women only get these awards because they have this. And this is actually the most important part of their case, which completely falls, so let me move on to the other points. We, on the other hand, will actually to show you how this mechanism works the other way around. How, because there's more incentive for the film industry to adapt, there will actually break this vicious circle in which women and in which films are rewarded for sexist films, and will actually create the fact that there are less sexist roles and more equal films. Now let me look at the second big point of the society, because this was a point that wasn't sufficiently engaged on the side of opposition. Now, first of all, we showed you how the criteria, when we're looking at gender-separated criteria, is completely unfair because there's no, because it's completely gender unspecific if you are good at acting or not. Now, this is something that they were not able to take down because they actually got lost somewhere, and this is, should different races have different categories as well. We actually showed you two problems that this causes. We showed you that this is bad because it fuels the issues that we see in society, and we gave you two lines of analysis. First of all, looking at sexism. Now, they only tackled this by saying women will no longer be represented, which I've already told you is a point that falls. So even if this was the case, we showed you that it's most important to tackle this problem at its roots, which was the point that was mostly ignored. Now, to this binary narrative, the only analysis we heard that this is somehow dismissed, that this is not important, that our society is not ready for this, and this is a notion that we team proposition by not only shocking, but also extremely condescending, and we believe that this is something that is very against their side. Now, if we look at the effects that we actually have on society, these were also things that we're more engaged with until very late in this debate. The discourse argument was only tackled in the third speech, so we're not able to engage with this further. And this normalization argument that we brought in our first speech was not tackled all through all three speeches, so we believe that these positive effects on society still stand on our side of the house. Because if we look at these different approaches, we see that one team was very capable at actually tackling the actual problem. We are fixing the root of the problem, and this is positive effects not only on business, but on the society as a whole. And that's why we're so proud to propose this motion.